All right. Hello, everyone. We're here again for part two, Architects of Community. I am once again talking to Matt Smith, an architect himself and in his own right. Today, we're going to look at building your community from the dreams up. How do you make something new when you have an old bunch of habits, let's say your old dreams, your old way sitting with you, and you want to leave that behind. Matt would know pretty much as well as anybody that in order to build a house, you need a plan. You need an architect, you need the drawings. So maybe as far as looking at a new community, you kind of need to look at going back to the drawing board and seeing what's worked and what hasn't in your past projects and going from there. What do you think about that, Matt?
Hey, Lorenzo, it's great to be here.
Hey.
So, I was listening to your talk with Howdy Mikowski the other day, and you made a comment which really struck a chord with me. You talked about aligning your consciousness with your dreams
Mm.
and the importance of that. And the reason it struck a chord with me is because these last several years I've been going through a lot of personal exploration and doing my shadow work and working with plant medicines and rebuilding my family, building a new family home for my family. So I've been putting a lot of my sort of architectural and design and build inclinations into actually doing for myself and doing for my family. And what I've come to realize is that knowing thyself is an essential place to begin when considering the architecture of community. You have,
Mm.
I believe that you have to start with yourself.
Mm.
We know what it looks like when we look around, what an architecture that's disharmonious, that comes like an imposition on community, that is dissonant energetically and rejects tradition, rejects community. We see it all around us all the time. In order to I believe that in order to undo that, speaking as a professional, do not comply is a really good place to begin. We don't have to comply with disharmonious, imposing uh, 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 styles of architecture, types of architecture, architectural trends, building trends that dismiss community, that don't consider community in the layout, in the planning. And it starts with the planning. Architecture
Mm.
is an extraordinary profession because it begins with sitting at a desk, imagining something. It's really magical, and manifesting it. You're setting gears into motion by drawing lines on paper, and you're bringing other disciplines and other people into a much larger process. And then at some point that leaps off of the page and into the field where builders actually start, the process of putting down footings and digging into the dirt. And to me, that's a very sacred act.
Mm.
When you're planting a future structure in the ground,
Mm.
what is that going to look like? How is that going to serve the whole? How is it going to manifest family unity? If it's a house, or if it's a public building, how is it going to manifest community? And all that starts with an act of consciousness. So it's really important, as I said, to begin with yourself.
Well, some of the things that I've seen and, I've discussed with my wife over the last little while when we're looking at problems is to take a bigger view of things, and it sounds like that's what you're talking about. I mean, if you're sitting looking face to face at a problem, from a level plane, sometimes you miss what's going on. And if you go for the bigger picture, like you say, if you're looking at a house and only trying to make some money, and so you cut corners or you use substandard building materials, or you don't care about the square footage or the flow of energy in a house, maybe you'll make a few extra dollars, but as you said, in the end, the family may live there that won't be as happy as they could be in relation to, the kind of life they're going to make and the kind of children they're going to help, acclimatize to this world, and the kind of happiness or lack therein they're going to build, since we're talking about community. So the fact that, you see that is very interesting for me. Right? I mean, I've discussed with my wife, if we were ever going to build a house, I said, I think we should call Matt, and I think we should get his architecture drawings, because she saw that in the picture you shared last time at the roundhouse, not the yurt, but and she went, oh my goodness, She goes, that's exactly the kind of house I want.
Hmm.
And I said, yeah, I mean, he has his heart in the right place, and he can see much beyond the square footage of what's required, to make a buck selling something, as you say, to go into the well, how to make a house a home by understanding who's going to live there and what they're going to gain or lose, from how it is designed in the first place.
Yeah, well, in terms of the roundhouses, I mean, it's really a joy to work with those structures, wooden yurts. They're exquisite structures. They're simple. They're elegant, but they're not overly complex, or their price point. They're compared to any other type of house. But when you're building a structure that has a pure geometry, you can call it a sacred geometry. That does create a resonance and a vibration that echoes out into the inhabitants. That was my experience, in the experience of watching people walk into these houses after they're built and just light up, and puts a smile on their face being in a structure. So for me, an architect of community, when you're considering architecture for community, you can actually elevate people's mood, their spirit, their emotions, just through thoughtful design, as well as the materials. If I was talking a previous podcast about my son's middle school that was brand new, just built a couple of years ago. And we were very excited, felt like, wow, what a privilege that we're having a brand new school built in our community. But then I saw what they were doing, and it was just steel stud boxes. And I realized, wow, they're building a Faraday cage and then stuffing it full of Wi-Fi. And, and now I look at it and all the kids say it looks like corporate center, or, even like a police, precinct. It doesn't look like a school and doesn't feel like a school. And so they had a golden opportunity to do something that really could elevate the community. And they missed the mark, and it's a shame, because the same amount of materials and costs and everything could have gone into building something really memorable, something that's going to affect the lives of children for generations.
Well, I think what it comes down to, because we talked about the interview I did with Howdy recently, and the whole topic was underlined, in my opinion, with how to leave the old dream and make a new dream. Right. And to understand that maybe whoever is architecting the old dream doesn't really have your best interests at heart. Like
No.
whoever designed that school, even like I've seen, even here in Japan, or even when I was living in Canada, when you try and get to the answers from a governmental office, the red tape you go through and the circles you go around, and you probably never really do get an answer. If you go, you get shunted from one place to the next till you've gone in circles till they hope you quit. And I've had that experience with big companies, and I sat there, like, what I'm getting at and wondering is, who's making these choices, right?
Right.
Who's sitting at the top deciding it's a metal and square box, and it's and you'll talk to the principal or the vice principal, and he'll say to principal, and you talk to principal, and he'll talk to the general manager in charge of education, and you'll talk to them, and they'll say maybe it's the minister of education. You talk to the manager of education, they'll say it's the president of education, and then the grand poobah of education, and probably you'll never ever get to chat with whoever was responsible in the first place. I'm guessing in the bigger community, for whoever decided that that's going to be a Faraday cage with Wi-Fi bouncing off and radiating the children. Getting a straight answer, I would say, in this day and age, from that outside community or the cage people are in, is nigh impossible on purpose.
Yeah, that's the programming. And I struggle with this idea of the simulation theory. But the idea of exiting the old program, the old dream, and entering a new dream, creating a new vision. That does resonate with me. And you're probably familiar with the films of Akira Kurosawa, being in Japan as you are.
When I was a stockbroker, I had a huge picture of Ran behind my couch.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I remember. Yeah. At the time, looked at it every day and go, I wonder why this is up here. This was even before I moved to Japan, like many, many years ago.
Huh.
So
Well,
yes.
my wife and I have been on a binge watching his movies, and we just watched Ikiru from 1952. Exquisite movie. It's a beautiful movie. So it focuses on the life of a bureaucrat who's been sitting at a desk and looking through his Coke bottle glasses and stamping documents, just a big stack of documents, putting a stamp on each one after he read it, putting in another pile. And he's been doing this for 30 years.
I saw the movie. Yeah.
Yeah, and 6 or 8 other bureaucrats around him just shuffling papers and moving people who would come in with complaints or with needs, and they would just send them to the next bureaucrat
Mm,
and next office, and nobody's responsible for anything. And that's just how the bureaucracy works. And like you said, if you ask, nobody really knows. It's just how it works, and it's kind of its own egregore.
mm,
Nothing ever gets done until he realizes, of course, that he has cancer, and
right.
he has a transformation, a personal transformation. So he, has an awakening, and then he decides that he's going to use his position, his bureaucratic position, to say yes to a group of women who are coming in talking about a broken sewer system or a cesspool that's in between their houses where there could be a park. And before, nobody could get anything done, but suddenly, because he had his personal
Mm.
transformation, he says, aha, I can actually move this along. And he does so, and he brings all the other bureaucrats along with him. And suddenly, at the end of his, I don't want to give away the movie, but you can imagine that at the end of the movie, there's he leaves behind this beautiful legacy in the form of a community park.
Right. And Ikilu means to live in English.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
And so
a
me,
verb for to
that's like,
live. Yeah.
what a beautiful example of architecture of community. And he's not an architect, he's a bureaucrat, but what he does is he manifests this thing that serves the community long after he's gone, and the community remembers him. His name lives on, and they honor him.
I mean, and even, we talked before we came on camera, some of the challenges families are having these days with the onerous rules. We'll put it
Mm,
that being forced on them. And so, I can hear some of our viewers, and I really want to take this back going, sure, he's in a bureaucrat, but, that's in a movie, and maybe his higher ups would never let him do this because, fill in your own reasons why they may say no. So I'm thinking, what is required then is, taking what Matt said further, is if you are in a situation where you want to change and make a park out of a sewer, which is a great analogy or a great poetic way of looking at things, and you're not allowed to do it inside, the contextual fields of the day, find a way out of that, find a way to move from there. If you come to a place where you're saying, but, my salary is $80,000 a year as a bureaucrat, and I'm about to retire in 3 years, so I have to stay. Ask your heart if that's a good idea, right? I
mm,
mean, maybe you can figure out a way to do both, to pretend to be there while you're, helping the park grow. I'm not sure how people are going to find creative solutions around these challenges, but too many times I've heard, there's nothing I can do because the rules say this, or there's nothing I can do because the taxes have said that. And, if you think about the fact that maybe that's being done on purpose, so you're being
mm.
pushed down, so you think you can't do something. I mean, maybe as a creative being being your own architect, maybe you just have to change those plans, figure something
Yeah.
that will work.
Yeah, and it's interesting to look at the movie, and it's easy to say, okay, well, the bureaucracy is the cage or the cave that he's stuck in. He needs to get out of that and maybe go find something else to do. But I think what the story tells is that it was his mind that was the cage. And once
Mm.
he stepped out of the own limitations of his imagination and opened himself up to possibilities and to serving a greater good,
I mean,
he stepped out of the cave.
I think in some ways the answer is always simple. I've had hours of talks with Howdy and other people, and I've done hundreds of videos about what's it like to get away from the monsters, what's it like to get out of the cave, what's it like to be free, what's it like to get out of the matrix, what's it like to, and to me, in some ways, it's just as simple as you've mentioned it. Get out of your mind, and the mind
Mm,
is the trap, the mind is the cage, the mind is the rules, the mind is the schooling. It's interesting, because the outside is the inside. So the schooling these days is being set up as a Faraday cage where, the cell phones is telling the mind what to think, be, act, and see and dream even.
yeah.
And to bust out of that and to get beyond that, I'm not saying it's easy because it's not, but perhaps it could be the only solution for making a livable, happy, healthy, loving community.
Yeah. The programming goes on 24/7 without stop, and they invest every bit of their resources in keeping it going. And every time you turn around, with having three children, it's, walking around with cell phones and being programmed in school, and it's just coming at them nonstop. And so the programming is relentless, and it does start with our mind. They're interested in controlling minds. So naturally, when we consider what the simulation is, I think that, the simulation as a program overlaying, a divine reality, and stepping out of the old dream into the new, to me, means stepping into divinity, our own divinity, and recognizing the divinity all around us and each other and so forth. And from there, I think that you can begin to pull material resources into the design execution of actual buildings and structures that reflect that reflect that alignment with nature and alignment with sort of a divine design.
And the one thing I think people miss, and I'm going to lay it out there in this conversation, in the simulation, so to speak, or in the matrix, or in this, cage of a dream, is that, they're always looking outside of themselves saying, who is programming this dream? Who is making me live here? Why are we a victim of this dream? Why are we in these bars? And, they may be getting their marching orders from the whoever they are, but it's the people in the cage, in my opinion, that are making the cage. And
Mm.
that's why that gets pushed away. And in any of those movies they talk about, I don't care whether it's The Matrix or The Man from Mars or The Prisoner or Westworld or all these other shows that people have ad nauseum quoted back to me. Whoever that was beautiful. I think, see, sometimes I see spirit in what I'm sharing. Spirit's going, keep it going, good job. These people, and I've done it before. It's just, if it's out there in mainstream, if it's out there in the movies, even if it's out there, especially in modern times, I think the key that's missed is we are that power.
Mm.
We are the ones making this cage. We are the ones that can tear the cage down then, right? If we
Right.
just stop participating in it,
Yeah.
maybe you have to take your kids out of school. Maybe you have to homeschool. I don't know. Maybe you have to move to a new country. Maybe you have to pretend to be in school while doing something else. The creative potential for how you need to make a new life really would be up to each and every one of us. But my bottom line is, I think there's enough of us out there that do have enough of imagination to make it happen.
Yes. Yes. And I believe we and those folks, we're finding each other. The people are networking, and like meets like. And to what you were saying about, it's the members of the cave, people that are stuck within the cave. If I've learned anything from these last 2-3 years, it's that, yes, we're participating or not in creating, the cave or the cage around ourselves. How many, it wasn't any cops, that came around knocking on my door and said, you have to
No,
leave your house, or you have to, social distance with your own children, or strap 3 masks on them. It was just a bunch of talking heads on a, television, and then neighbors wagging fingers at each other, reinforcing the cage. And so, that's an important lesson.
it really is. It really is. I mean, I walk around here in Japan, and garbage trucks are announcing before, COVID, be careful, or now the garbage trucks are going around when it's cold here. Don't use enough electricity because you should save for the, so-called whatever wars they happen to be fighting. And I'm going like, who the hell is taking their living advice from a garbage truck, right? If you consider it, right? Or the robots
Are
when you.
there actual like voice
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
voices
yeah.
coming out of the
Yeah,
garbage
yeah,
truck?
yeah, 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 yeah. The garbage trucks here play music when they go down the alleyways all the time. They've always done that. La, 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 la. Makes you crazy eventually. But when supposed viral shenanigans was very high, the garbage truck was reminding people about, and so, talk about mental programming. It's going down
Energetic
the
garbage
alleyways
out.
2 days a week, and it's telling you, don't forget the virus, don't forget the virus. And I'm going like, who the hell I even said this to my wife, and she didn't think about it the way, I think about it imaginatively. It's like, who's taking medical advice from a garbage truck? It's like, think about that, or
Yes.
or it's getting cold and they're telling you to not use energy. And like, who's taking, living advice for their elderly or their babies or from a garbage truck? I mean, if you consider for a moment, or I'll walk into a mall and it says, don't forget to wear your mask and blah, 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 and I'm about to for a second, I'm going, wait a minute. I walked into a door, clicked a sensor, a robot voice is talking to me, and it's reminding me to be a slave.
Right.
I'm going like, what? Like, what am I taking? I mean, that's what I meant by getting above the cave or the cage. You're going, wait a minute, where's this advice coming from?
Mm.
First off, it's a robot talking to me. Why would I listen to a pre-recorded voice that has nothing to do with life?
Mm.
And then you got to wonder who's recorded this voice, who's decided that it's a good idea for garbage trucks to, and you can see it's a pressure, right, to push you back into, as you mentioned, finger wagging and tongue lashings and all this other nonsense that people do to each other. You really have to keep an eye, I guess, beyond the normal bars, even if they're
Yeah.
robotic voices, and see how that can help you. Maybe everyone's got to become their own architect, right? At least of their own consciousness to get out of this silliness.
Right. Yeah. If we're getting our programming from a garbage truck, well, then our architecture might look like pods and dinner might look like insects.
Yeah.
But if we can raise our consciousness, elevate ourselves, learn to know thyself, and physician heal thyself, begin within. Really, it really comes down to that. And I've tried the other way. I know what it looks like when yeah, I know what the other way looks like. We all see it all around us all the time. So I think that it's definitely time to step out of the old dream, start forging a new dream.
Yeah. And as soon as you come to a dead end, whatever it is, you say, well, I'd like to, but I can't. I'd
Mm.
like to, but I can't. Think of it as a big butt in your way, right? And
Mm-hmm.
a B double T, big butt, and
Right.
go, how do you get around this butt? How
Right.
do I find a way to do this without having to sell my soul? How do I find a way to do this without having to, give
Right.
up my sovereignty? How do I find a way to do that? Maybe you have to pretend. One of the best things I heard a long time ago when someone talked about traveling and when you supposedly needed your poo passes or whatever they want to call those things, someone says, you don't have to lie, you don't have to, do shenanigans. He goes, find a doctor that will give you a fake pass,
Yeah.
or find a doctor that knows what's going on and will do this other thing for you. And I went, well, that's a great solution, is that you're fighting the system without getting into a knife fight with someone with a bigger knife,
Yes.
because there's always an intelligent answer to get to what you need. It's just not going to be given to you, right? A garbage truck isn't going to give you your answer unless it's, picking up your garbage. And, a crazy neighbor or a crazy newspaper or a crazy cell phone, Yahoo or Google is not going to give you what you need. Literally, you're going to have to, be a man, pull up your big boy pants and go do some designing and planning and exploring for yourself. And chances are, in fact, I know you will find something beyond the normal if you give yourself the opportunity, to go do that.
Yeah. And that's a shift in consciousness. The but I can't is just, that's just a guide. That's showing you that, there's another way of looking at this problem. And if you can sort of train your mind to look at obstacles as opportunities, then there's no stopping. There's no limit to what we can accomplish and what we can create together.
There you go. Well, maybe we've come to a little bit of an end on this particular conversation. It went to a place I didn't expect. Didn't really think that we were going to talk about architecting our way out of the cave or designing our consciousness away from that, or even talking about to live, Ikura from the Rand book, which is really interesting, or the Rand movie. But this has been why I love doing these chats with Matt and other people, and what I mean in, Matt and I talked about as well, when you want to do something or change the world, don't talk about it, do it.
Mm.
And I think beyond the fact that people like seeing things happen, what happens when you act on things is some things you can't think about. Every time I do a video, whether it's with Matt or the 300 or 400 I've done to this date, it's always different than I thought it was going to be. Always. I'm sure Matt thought it was going to go a certain way, perhaps, and it's probably taken, I surprise him, he surprises me, we surprise each other, a hand comes through the door and surprises both of us. It's the kind of thing that's, once you start acting and making something new, other energies will show up and guide you that pretty much are impossible to think about because they don't exist between your two ears. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, they don't exist in your mind. You have to let something else guide you towards a better way to be alive, and that's how you make a better world. In my opinion, that's how you become a spiritual, conscious, high level architect of community.
Lorenzo, it's always a pleasure, and I always get so much out of having these conversations with you. Thank you.
Well, we're going to continue on. We're going to get this one up very soon. I'm going to put Matt on the spot and say, Matt, send me a paragraph or something, leading into this, and I'll get it up as soon as possible then. And I'm happy to continue on and do more. It seems to me out of part 2, we might have part 3, 4, 5, and 6, and we can continue on as works for both our schedules. And I appreciate everything you're doing and have, since the very first day we met. So thank you so much for everything you're sharing, Matt.
Likewise, Lorenzo. Thank you.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching. We'll get this up soon. If anyone has any questions, suggestions, like and subscribe. Come see what we're doing. Come to the new agora.ca. Come to the hub that's there. You'll see Matt's hub page. You'll see tons more information like this. We update it literally every day, and there's more for you to do. There's more to contribute. There's more to participate. You can do as much as you like, or you can just read as much as you like and do what you like. And we're all delighted to have you with us. And I will be with Matt again very soon. Cheers, everyone.